The FBI is helping federal and state officials look into these scams. According to investigators, fraudsters would recruit healthy people into their hospice program. Then recruiters or corrupt doctors would line their pockets with millions of taxpayer dollars.
At 4:30 inches the morning, while Southern California was still silent, more than 200 federal agents appeared at the same time outside. Dozens of luxury mansions with red and blue lights cutting through neighborhoods that were usually peaceful. The people targeted that day were not crime bosses or underground gangs, but doctors, nurses, and owners of end-of-life care facilities, people connected to trust, healing, and the final days of patients' lives. According to the investigation records that were released, they were suspected of being involved in a medical fraud network worth more than $500 million. But what shocked the public most was not only that enormous amount of money, but the way everything was said to have happened inside places that were supposed to be the safest and most humane of all. This operation was called Bitter Pill, a short name, but behind it were nearly 2 years of surveillance data collection and tracking unusual financial activity. According to authorities, the network under investigation involved around 35 individuals, ranging from doctors and nurses to people running end-of-life care centers, also known as hospice facilities. Hospice care is a medical model created for patients in the final stage of life, where the goal is no longer curing illness, but helping them spend their last days with less pain, more comfort, and someone by their side. Hospice by nature is a deeply humane place. It is built on the belief that even when healing is no longer possible, people still deserve kindness and care. But according to the accusations made public in this case, that very system was turned into a tool for generating enormous profits. Care records, medical decisions, and services that should have come from the real needs of patients were suspected of becoming links in a profit-driven machine. And when a place created to reduce suffering is placed under suspicion of serving financial interests, the story is no longer only an economic investigation. It becomes a much bigger question. What happens when trust in healthcare is treated like something that can be bought and sold? According to court records, the center of the case lies in the way some facilities were accused of handling medical records. The healthcare insurance system in the United States, especially in end-of-life care, depends heavily on the accuracy and honesty of professional documentation. When a patient is identified as being in the final stage of life and qualifies for hospice services, support and insurance payments are activated based on that medical evaluation. The problem begins when that evaluation itself comes under suspicion. Prosecutors say there were cases where patients were listed as being in end-stage condition, even though their actual health did not fully match the medical standards required. Some care records were believed to not reflect the true condition of patients, and some insurance payment requests were submitted for services where the level of actual care provided was questioned. Even more concerning, there were cases where patients were recorded as needing hospice care for unusually long periods, far beyond what is normally seen in standard hospice models. When a system runs on trust in professional records, if those records are inaccurate, money can be released almost automatically. And if one facility repeats that hundreds of times each month, the financial numbers can rise at a speed that is hard to imagine. That is exactly why this case drew attention, not only because of the money, but because it touched the most important foundation of healthcare trust. The content in this video is for informational and reference purposes only. Although it has been cross-referenced with reputable sources, some details may have changed or may not be entirely accurate. What made this case so shocking was not only each separate record or each insurance payment under suspicion, but the way everything was said to have operated like one complete system. According to investigators, these were not isolated mistakes or sudden bad decisions made by a few individuals, but an organized model with many connected parts working closely together over a long period of time. Some people were responsible for reaching patients and bringing them into the system. Others handled paperwork, prepared medical records, and completed related procedures. Some followed the insurance payment process, making sure the money was approved. And deeper inside, there were also people believed to be managing the flow of money, controlling financial operations, and keeping the machine running. When every position has a clear role, it no longer looks like one single bad act. It looks like a structure designed to maximize profit. That is why investigators described it as a disguised business model, a system wearing the appearance of healthcare, but suspected of operating by the logic of revenue. What made the public feel cold was this. If these accusations are proven true, then for many years, what was being sold was not only care but also the trust of patients and their families, people who entered hoping to find kindness during the most fragile stage of life. Healthcare exists on two foundations that cannot be separated: professional skill and ethics. Professional skill helps doctors make the right decisions, while ethics makes sure those decisions always put the patient's well-being first. When someone walks into a hospital, clinic, or hospice facility, they do not only bring medical records, they bring trust. They trust that medical decisions are made for health, for safety, and so that their remaining days or the days of someone they love will be treated with dignity and kindness. That is why in this case, what made the public most angry was not only the huge financial numbers or the accusations connected to insurance. What felt heavier was the feeling that trust had been betrayed. If a care system built to support the most vulnerable patients is suspected of operating by the logic of profit, then this is no longer only about paperwork or payments. It becomes a deep ethical problem. Because when money begins to stand in front of human health, the line between healing and exploitation becomes extremely dangerous. And people reacted strongly, not only because they saw a major investigation, but because they saw a very real fear. If even places of healing can no longer be trusted, then where can people place their trust at all? According to prosecution documents, the money connected to this case was believed to have moved through many different accounts, reaching a scale of hundreds of millions of dollars. That financial element became one of the biggest focuses of the investigation, because it allowed authorities to see the larger picture behind medical records that looked completely normal on the surface. Instead of only checking each document one by one, investigators followed transactions over many years to identify links between individuals, facilities, and the payments being made. As those money trails began connecting, a much larger structure slowly appeared. According to investigators, part of the related assets had already been frozen to support further verification and later legal action. However, it is also important to clearly state that this is still the legal process stage. The people named in these records are still considered innocent under legal principles until the court gives a final decision. And the upcoming trial will be the place where the difference between accusation and proven truth is decided. This case does not stop at the question of who is right or wrong. It opens a much bigger issue. How could a healthcare monitoring system allow unusual warning signs to exist for so long? Many experts believe the weakness lies in the structure itself. Most insurance approval processes depend on paperwork and data reported by healthcare facilities. When the number of records each month reaches enormous levels, checking every single case deeply becomes almost impossible. At the same time, on-site inspections do not always happen often enough or fast enough to catch problems in time. That creates a dangerous gap. If reporting moves faster than verification, the system will always be running behind. And if that gap stays open long enough, small problems can grow into something much bigger. This is not only the story of one criminal case, but also a warning about how fragile systems become when they depend too heavily on trust written on paper. When a case moves from financial suspicion to a federal criminal file, the legal consequences are usually no longer small. According to public information, this case includes healthcare insurance, fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit fraud groups of actions treated very seriously in the United States justice system. That means if the accusations are proven in court, some defendants could face long prison sentences, very large financial penalties, and the seizure of related property. But reaching a final conclusion will not be quick. With a huge amount of documents, financial records covering many years, and many witnesses from different sides, the trial is expected to last for months or even longer. Every testimony, every medical record, and every financial transaction could become an important piece of the puzzle. And this is where everything will be separated clearly: what is suspicion from investigators and what is evidence strong enough to stand in court. Because in law, public emotion does not decide the sentence, evidence is what speaks last. Cases like this never stay only inside the courtroom. Their real impact spreads into society and directly affects how people see the entire healthcare system. When a healthcare facility comes under suspicion, the first thing lost is usually not money but trust. People begin asking themselves whether the medical decisions they receive are truly for their health or whether there may be other motives behind them. And once that question appears, the fragile peace between patient and caregiver has already started to crack. Not only that, honest organizations also suffer heavily. Hospitals, clinics, and hospice facilities that operate correctly may face stricter monitoring, harder approval processes, and much greater pressure to prove transparency. That is necessary, but it also creates a new burden for the whole industry. On a wider level, cases like this often lead to tighter regulations, changes in inspection policies, and stronger financial control inside the medical insurance system. In other words, the consequences are not only for the people under investigation, but may affect how the entire healthcare system works for many years afterward. The lesson from this story is not only for healthcare. Any system built on trust, from healthcare and education to finance, can become fragile if it lacks strong enough control mechanisms. Trust helps everything work faster and with more humanity, but for that same reason, when it is abused, the damage is often deep and long-lasting. One wrong signature, one record not carefully checked, one skipped process can sometimes create an entire chain of serious consequences behind it. That is why three things must always exist together: transparency, supervision, and accountability. Transparency, so every decision can be seen clearly. Supervision, so mistakes do not have the chance to continue for too long. And accountability, so every person understands that every action must be answered with truth. When these three become weak, trust becomes the easiest thing to break. And a system that loses trust often takes many years to rebuild. At this moment, the case is still going through the court process, and all final conclusions must wait for the court's decision. In major cases like this, truth does not live inside dramatic headlines online, but inside evidence testimony, and what can actually be proven by law. But no matter what the final judgment is, this story has already left behind a much bigger question. When a system is built to care for people, to protect the most vulnerable, and then comes under suspicion of being used for financial gain, who carries the first responsibility? Is it the individuals who directly made the decisions, or is it the structure itself which created gaps large enough for wrongdoing to continue for years without being discovered? Maybe the answer does not exist on only one side. Because one wrong action may begin with one person, but for it to grow into an entire system, it usually needs the silence of many other connected parts. And that is the part society may spend the longest time thinking about. What about you? How do you see this story? Share your thoughts respectfully below. And if you want to follow more deep investigation, stories explained clearly and without cheap drama, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next episodes.